Hello, everybody, and let's exit the port. Hello, Mr. Grumbles. How you doing? It's good to see you, sir.
I'm doing good, thank you, Tiger. How are you?
Bit of a different format this time around to everybody watching and or listening, all depending on where you find your portcast content. This time around, we're trying a purely recorded version, so no live version, no input from audience or such. This is just us, just to see how it feels. We're still in that kind of let's figure things out phase. What you guys didn't see as the run-up to this was us sitting here as part of the editorial meeting to kind of figure out how to blend in Grumbles. We were making masks, we were green screening stuff, we were editing Grumbles' camera, and yeah, things were technical. Then we found
and amusing.
And amusing, yeah,
by all and amusing. Yeah.
Very true, very true. And then we finally found a good solution where we just simply gave Grumbles a green screen, green background, so I could figure this out.
Genius.
Yeah, like it's pro streamers right here. Isn't that what they say usually?
Well, what is it? Failure is success in progress, right? So.
Very true. Very true. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see the topics on my left side here. But for those of you at home, we will be talking a lot about World of Warships this time around. A lot has happened. There's plenty of things I want to bring up that I've talked about before on my stream. I also know that you have talked a bit about this on your stream. I know we've talked about this on the Grumbling. I know a lot of others have talked about these things. It's everything from content creators, community contributors. There's the current state of the game with the current matchmaking, with everything going on with the new Italian grind. We're probably still gonna touch on the wonderful Commander rework that was done. We're going to be talking a bit about content saturation in World of Warships, but we also have some miscellaneous that we want to talk about. But first and foremost, I say we just jump straight into what has happened recently in World of Warships. Of course, the biggest news is that Wargaming chose to remove one of their own community contributors. And not just any one of them.
I know, poor Jingles. Wait, what?
No, Jingles has not been removed, and not as far as I know. Like, who knows what happens by the time that we release this episode? But no, Flamu got removed while he was live on stream. They removed him. We're not going to go into details or anything or such, but I want to talk to you a bit about this, Grumbles. Like, what does it say about the relationship between one of their community contributors, his followers, and Wargaming when people congratulate him for being removed from the program?
Well, I think that there's I do remember, like, as it was happening or whatever the day after, I think it was Dobby Mate. Yeah, it was Dobby Mate on his, he was also trying to bring up the topic like we're doing without going into the I don't know how we skirt around it that much. So we've mentioned the thing now, the cat's out of the bag. But he said that, there's probably Flamu being happy and Wargaming being happy. But ultimately not a happy situation overall, but probably that kind of emotional release, that kind of like, this isn't working out. It's been grinding and grating at us for a long time.
Yeah.
And now it's dealt with. It would have been probably good to, if that could have been a mutual agreement type thing, but at the end of the day, it's a role that the company offers. They have their terms and conditions, terms of service, if you will. And you know, they clearly felt like in all the button pushing that's been going on in a psychological sense for a very, very long time. And also, you know, kudos to Flamu. You got to give credit where it's due. He's been a chief button pusher for a long time, and quite how he's managed to achieve that is remarkable, and maybe alludes to some of the more concerning underlying issues in the community contributor program, that they didn't have a way. Again, there's a lot of speculation here, of course, but it didn't appear, or at least what's been publicized about it, there doesn't appear to have been a way or a channel for them to kind of iron out their grievances as such. It's just got to a point of like, it seems like Wargaming mostly just ignored it. I'm sure they weren't entirely ignoring it internally, but from the public side of things, they were like, yeah, whatever. And then eventually something snapped and they were like, okay, that's it. We've had enough. So I think that what it does is it clearly highlights the topic that we've touched on before, which, you know, is the let's say growing divide. I would describe it like that.
Yep.
Considering my words, between the company of this beloved game of ours and you know, essentially the player base. It's not so much a CC issue. The CCs are meant to be a bridge and a solid channel between the company and the player base, as well as being players themselves, obviously. And I think it's clear that those bridges have been, if not burnt out, they've definitely been on fire for a long time.
Yeah.
Same with the super testers. Yeah.
Like the thing you say about the bridges having been on fire for quite some time, I think that's an understatement. Because let's face it, people like Flamu, the super testers, and everybody else that have had access to content for quite some time, they have been saying to Wargaming, please do not release this ship, Slava, and please do not release this skill. Deadeye. Something in my throat. I don't know what it is. It's just
weird. That is.
Yeah,
Don't worry. Sorry, folks. We'll try and get that sorted out.
Yeah, I'll drink some water.
Norwegian mosquitoes, probably.
Yeah, the northern Norwegian winter mosquito. There you go. No, like they've said it so clearly and so adamantly. Like, do not release these. Don't do this. There's an issue with this, and the issue has to be resolved before you can do this. And they've done the same thing about subs. They said the same thing about the carrier rework, and they were working hard on that. Like, don't do this. Don't do it in this state. Let us test more. Let us talk more. Let's send this back and forth between the community and you, because that used to be the role of the community contributor. Get this out to the community. What does the community say? Go back to Wargaming. Fix things. New iteration. And then keep on going until, yeah, okay, the community is happy with the state of this. But no. Now, like, I know we talked a bit about this on the Grumbling not too long ago. The fact that CCs aren't allowed even to test ships on stream anymore. It's a big part of it. It used to be a big part of it, allowing streamers to preview things and show it off. No, now instead, the way you have previews of things is, well, you let people buy crates for several thousands of doubloons at a time. But no, let's circle back to Flamu and that situation. Yeah. The thing about the CC program for Flamu and that is, of course, that he's a huge creator. He has had a massive following for a long time, meaning that Wargaming have probably seen a lot of profit from him, and have kind of just gone, okay, we need to overlook this. Like, it's it's a thing we can just overlook because it brings us more than it paints us, you know. Does that sound like does that
No, I
sound
think
like it
that's a
makes
big
sense?
part of it.
Yeah.
I think that if I extend it a little bit, I think it's what it shows, or it's symptomatic of the fact that that community contributor, maybe the original idea, maybe the way it's developed over time, or perhaps the fact that it arguably hasn't developed sufficiently over time or kept with the times. I think that that is part of the problem here. And I think that, ultimately Flamu, for all of his kind of, what do you describe it as, like, sarcasm, some people say toxicity or whatever, and there's certainly an element of that to it, which he wouldn't deny himself, I'm sure, or at least not without his tongue in his cheek. I think that, ultimately, that, as I said before, it's something that grates away over time, and the relationship has gone rapidly downhill. The fact that, when it happened, or just after, he publicized some videos. I saw a thing on YouTube or on Twitter, I think it was, about a conference he went to about CV rework and about what was happening, and them digging into all the statistics, and a lot of CCs and other people were invited to that event, and you just see the video, and you hear his questions and other people's questions, and you see the responses, and the devs sort of struggling to answer with, kind of dancing around the obvious, which is, we've spent a lot of money on this and we want everybody to buy into it. Otherwise, some jobs are probably going to be lost, and people are going to be upset because of the amount of development time went into it. So, but what I'm trying to get at is that that's obviously been going on a long time. That video footage he clearly couldn't publicize prior to, whilst being a CC. And as soon as he wasn't, I'm sure he checked his legal rights and everything else afterwards, because he's a smart cookie. And one of the first things he did was kind of hit them with the full broadside. That in itself there's a positive side to that, which is it unmasks and shows us a little bit behind the curtain. But there's also the side of it that just fans the flames and brings some more negativity out of it. I think. What do I want to see happen from this? Maybe to sort of turn the corner a bit on it. This is a wake up call for CCs to think about their position and why they joined the program, and what they're looking to develop from it. And certainly a wake up call for Wargaming themselves, because this isn't a decision they've taken lightly. It might have been an emotional snap point or something by somebody higher up or whatever. They're like, right, I'm sick of this, whatever. We're all humans or humanoids at the end of the day. But this should be an opportunity for Wargaming to say, okay, we need to rethink this program. We need to rethink our engagement levels with the community. Certainly the long-standing, and we touched on this before in one of the grumblings, it's more the longer term, longer in the tooth players like ourselves that have been around since closed beta or before, and they're the multi-year players, let's say, they're the ones that are kind of feeling the pinch, I think, the most, because you simply have that experience and that emotional attachment, all that history. Ultimately, without grabbing forward into other topics coming up later, that there's a whole bunch of stuff that I think the player base overall would like to see them address. Not necessarily talking about fixing everything all at once magically, but again, the conference video really did shine a light on some of the thinking and some of the really, really deep-seated, let's call them challenges rather than problems. So let's call them challenges that that the company faces, because there's no easy answer to that. You've got an essentially arcade video game with the mechanics, how they are. You've got the possibility to tweak things quite, to quite a granular extent. And then you've got the difficulty of having to wait a considerable amount of time and do a lot of calculating and processing, the beloved spreadsheets topic, to work out whether those tweaks have worked the way you need to, both for the player base to be happy, or at least content, and also for it to be still making financial sense for you. So this could, in turn, draw a lot of attention to the fact that maybe their business model is too dependent on certain specific aspects of essentially of the mechanics of the game, right? So if the mechanics of the game are, and then tweaking with them even to make small changes, you know, like the ADD gets a 0.2 second reload buff or nerf, or, you know, but if that is correlated eventually through whatever complex smoke and mirrors to we're still making enough profit or not, then that's that obviously shows you the depth and the complexity of the topic at hand, right? I think that I really think that they need to reboot their CC program. I talked about this weekend on my stream. I can't remember if we talked on Friday or not, but I think there might even have to be a space for maybe an additional category. I mean, they had super testers that they kind of ignored, and they've got CCs that they kind of mostly ignore. Depending who you talk to, completely ignore or partially ignore. And I think they need to they really need to earnestly think about what amount of time and eventually money they're willing to, let's say, reinvest in their product for the good of the long-standing player community, because they've gone heavily in the last year or two, certainly last year and up till now, heavily in the direction of growth, which is kind of old school business logic. And modern businesses and the thriving companies are looking at not growth in isolation. They're looking at retention of customer, and they're looking at whether people are enjoying their product, and they're also looking at whether the employees are enjoying their product.
Yeah, and in the sense, we actually have to look at the super testers and the CCs, even though they're not paid, as employees, because they are doing a service, they are doing a job for wargaming, and in a sense, so are all the streamers out there, all the content creators that don't get special access or anything like that, are doing a service to wargaming. And I'm seeing more and more streamers and content creators for Warships content move away from it after the last major update. This has nothing to do with the whole kerfuffle with Flamu. No, this has to do with the major rework and the fact that, like we've mentioned before, there feels to be some sort of like huge disjointed weird chasm between wargaming and their player base. And I think that is largely because they've started to not listen to their community contributors. Community contributors are more and more falling into the same sort of category that CCs for Gaijin are. And just disclaimer, I am a CC for Gaijin. I absolutely love the program because I'm not a community contributor. I'm a content creator. I'm here to create content for them. I'm not here to test for them. I'm not here to bridge that gap, but I still do that. Because from time to time, Gaijin will ask, okay, what do people actually think of this? And we have a way in through the Discord. So far, I feel like the feedback has been listened to in regards to tests. The last few dev servers have been, like, there have been blatant things that have been figured out and tweaked and so on. And it feels like they're listening to them. It doesn't feel like, for instance, in this case, where multiple creators or contributors have said, don't do this release, don't do this change, because, and then given good reasons behind it, but still Wargaming goes, yeah, the community contributors are speaking up anyway, and it's just they're just completely ignoring it, and that's an issue. It's a big issue.
Well, it's like, what's that annoying din from over there we keep hearing? And it's like somebody's like, oh, don't worry about that. We just turned that down. Yeah, exactly. I think I'd like to, because I think there's two there's 2 points I don't want to forget to mention. One is, the Flamu thing is a bit of an outlier, right? It's kind of an extreme scenario thing where it's all the root causes and all the same fundamental issues, right, and symptoms that have just hit, the wrong sets of whatever nerves at various points, right? And to be honest, neither party really comes out of this great, because whatever you think, and even with the congratulations that go, ultimately, essentially, it's a situation where you can't really be happy about that relationship ending. I think you can short term for the individual, but overall, as you said, it's a great showcase. It's a good platform. Flamu's channel is very popular, very successful, in fact, just credit to him, the amount of sort of patience I would guess he's had, and I know this goes in both directions for wargaming too, but ultimately to one person kind of thing versus a huge multi-million euro company or whatever, it is a sort of David and Goliath kind of thing. But I think the other thing though with this rework is we talked about this recently, was one, it's like, for me personally, it feels like a straw that breaks the camel's back, and it's not so much just the not listening to things in advance, but it's more that it highlights for me the disconnect, between the company and the player base, right? And the problem is at the bottom of the chasm that we all fall in because there's no bridge there, so we just go down into the depths, as we don't come up like Gandalf the White later on. It's what I find at the bottom of this kind of a metaphorical chasm is they've reduced the fun of playing their sort of leading product, right? I don't know how the numbers rack up between ships and tanks, but let's keep to ships for now. This is a huge product. There are over 500 staff, I think it is, that work exclusively just on ships out of 5,000 employees or something they've got. So it's a huge number. It's a huge chunk, and that's not all the overlapping like teams that support each other and whatever. That's just dedicated purely to the development and maintenance of this game, right? So that's a huge cost, huge commitment on their part. And what this latest rework has done is it's brought, from a positive point of view, a good framework, more opportunities for them to develop the game and broaden it in certain areas, like whatever. We won't talk about the classes particularly, but the opportunity to bring more versatility and some more dynamics to the game. Then the actual way they delivered it and what they delivered shows or highlights again this disconnect, because they took some of the more fundamental fun parts of the game, and they just kind of were like, well, we've got to fit this thing in here, it's kind of this shape and size, let's just take a big sledgehammer, smash all over the surface area. A whole load of other stuff will get damaged as well because we're hitting stuff with a sledgehammer, but at least we got this piece slotted in,
what they've basically done is it says the same thing on the tin, but it doesn't do the same thing inside because all the fucking things are broken.
So I'll give you mine, right? And I was going to say a couple of, I think it's fair to say okay, let's just say a very popular North America CC, who I'm a big fan of, that may or may not bear a slight resemblance to when I wear my Grumbolf the Grey outfit. He and I both share a love of a certain ship called the Massachusetts.
Yep.
Or should we say we used to, right? High five.
In that same club.
The Massachusetts is nowhere near as much fun on a consistent basis as it was prior to this patch, right? And it's one of the best examples you can take. So much so, and I said this on my streams on the weekend, and I know this is like, taking it a little bit to that slightly extreme borderline, but I even thought to myself, I wonder if I raise a ticket to Wargaming saying, I bought this product from you in good faith, it cost me 259 million rubles, whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'd like some compensation, please, or not necessarily my money back. I've had my money's worth of playing the ship for a few years, whatever, right? But you have degraded this product. It is through no fault of my own whatsoever, but you have degraded this DLC by changing, by moving the goalposts or whatever you want to describe it.
I would love for that to be a thing. I would love for that to be a thing. Problem is,
imagine how many
they
people
haven't changed the ship. They've changed.
I'm talking of Flamu, right? Flamu was one of the big influences with that ship.
Yeah.
Because he tested it early on, and then he tested it around release, and everything was finalized. And he was like, "Is this ship a little bit silly? Has it got terrible dispersion? Blah blah." Like, yes. Is it a hell of a lot of fun? Yes. Buy the ship if you want smiles.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I was like, I'm going to go and buy a Massachusetts because this, if a sniper who likes really accurate guns can really frankly tell you a lot of the ship, it doesn't work. It's kind of trash, but oh my God, it's so much fun.
Exactly.
Right? Then you're like, okay, there must be something to this product. So I went and bought the product, and I've never been unhappy with it ever since. Not talking about, we'll get into the matchmaking. This may be a good segue. Being in tier 10s all the time, all the yada, 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 planes, right? But through all of that, the Massachusetts and similar ships could still be, bottom line, a hell of a lot of fun to play. You just go in there, your brain's not quite firing, or, you need that chill, slow, not going to run around a Terrible or something, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You just want to go in there and just punch a few things and have a lot of pew-pew and just come out, win, lose, or draw with a bit of a smile on your face. Like, this was ridiculous. I hit 250, whatever, right? And you can't do that anymore. My personal one, it's a tech tree ship, but the Alsace, ruined.
That's the Alsace to all the others out there wondering what he's talking about.
You've confused everyone now. I'm not going to dig you out of that hole. It's your hole. You can sit in it proudly. But the Alsace is no longer fun to play. I mean, you'll have, or let's put it this way, it's degraded. You can have 1 in 20 fun, whereas before it was, 50% fun and 50% melting, whatever, right? Because I'm playing it silly, and all the silly arguments will go, well, it's not meant to be played like that. And doesn't matter. You could play it like that, and you could have a jolly amount of fun. So,
and let's face it. What's the main thing behind a game? Like, what's the main purpose behind a game? It's to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think pretty much the entire player base that have touched a secondary ship at some point. We're talking the Tirpitz. We're talking the Massachusetts. We're talking the Jean Bart, the Alsace, Große Kurfürst, all of these things. Getting into that secondary range, allowing them to just go nuts and pummel everything, set fires, and like that constant plink of death as you're sitting there and your bow in shit and a ding 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 ding, like, you go nuts.
It's gonna be torps.
Yeah, like you're just sitting there and you hear the plinking of those secondaries on your armor, and it's driving you insane. But the guy that's sitting over there and his secondary ship, he's having a lot of fun. And I think I speak for every last single one of us when I say this patch has been detrimental to that for many reasons. One reason because of the way secondaries now work. Kudos to Wargaming for allowing us to actually have secondaries on both sides for once, because God forbid that the crew runs from their stations on the starboard side to the port side when you focus the secondaries.
Yeah, because the crews used to get a bit of a nap, didn't they?
So they could they could just hang back and chill out because there's a war going on the other side of the ship, not on this side. No, not at all. but now you can actually fire from both sides at the same time, which is good, and you can still focus targets, which is good.
But neither side can hit anything.
No, exactly. Like you can't hit anything anymore. Yes, they've upped the range on things. Oh, you can hit things further out. No, you can't. I can in theory, but I can't hit it further out. That's the problem. The second thing that has ruined secondary ships now, and I've mentioned it before, I will mention this thing again because I absolutely bloody hate it on anything else than a few ships that really benefit from them. Deadeye.
Mm.
Because Deadeye has taken all of these wonderful ships that everybody loves to play in a medium to close range role, and it has removed them to outside of that. They have taken, like, how many Girls of Kurfists have you seen that now sit on the border? Granted, there used to be a lot. There are now even more. This is maybe the worst ship to sit at range with. But now there's even more of them. And you have...
They probably increased the accuracy of the GK so that instead of hitting once in every 20 salvos, it's...
Exactly.
But I fully get your point, and I agree with you.
So now you have battleships captains that... Oh, he's getting close to being within my Deadeye range. I need to back up. No, you don't. No, you don't. Your ship still functions. Your ship, come back. I'm not gonna sit here, be alone at the front lines and being spammed to death by HE and everything while you fuck off to the next match. I'm sorry, I get really worked up on this.
That's all right. You hide it well. That's what's important.
Oh, it's just
Discord hung there for me for a moment, by the way, just so you know. But
yeah, no, it's this culmination of so many things that it's ruining these wonderful ships that I love to play.
Well, can I want to bolt on an extra point?
Sure.
Because the battleships is the easy part, right?
Yeah.
I think the poor cruiser captains, obviously with the Deadeye, they're getting deleted left, right, and center. I actually don't feel that bad because HE spam fire meta.
Yeah,
you've had a good run, cruisers. You've had a balanced star.
They still have the run, honestly.
Exactly right. If you're a good anyway, but the point I wanted to make was destroyers. Now, destroyers on the one hand have been kind of the big winners. We'll ignore the CV topic for a minute and perma spotting, but overall, DDs, go for it because there's so many skills in there. I don't even get to use half of them because, funnily enough, there's like a cookie cutter that I prefer to use, but whatever. That I have got more variety in my builds now than I had before, so I'll give them the credit for that.
Yep.
But it's only marginal. It's a few special scenarios or ships where it makes sense. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, for destroyers, it's not as much fun either. And it's like, but Grumbles, how can it not be as much fun when you just said that they're kind of the winners and you've got all this variety of skills? And it's like, yes, but half the time you've got nothing to go hunting. And there is nothing, honestly, there's nothing worse for DD players, and I'm talking psychologically and also for your statistics, right? For those who care about stats, don't care about stats, kids. Anyway, is being bored out of your absolute tiny minds in a destroyer because you switch off, you don't pay attention, and that's when the random torp salvos hit you, or
exactly.
you come around the corner into the Stalingrad or something, right? Because you just weren't looking at the mini-map because you're bored out of your skull because you know, Grumpy had one recently, didn't he? Like 160k or something in the Benham, and he's like, but I was so bored. Half of that match, I was just saying and I this is where I have to say, and this is the sarcasm, right? So I won't be able to do it anywhere to the degree of a Flamu, right? But seriously, like, hang on, without hitting my mic. Well done, round of applause, Wargaming, because you managed to make ships like the Massachusetts, the Jean Bar, and even my beloved Asasio not fun a lot of the time. Yeah. And that seriously, that is some proper programming skills, that is, because you can take ships that were absolute guaranteed, oh, I'm having a miserable day, I've lost 5 in a row. Hell, we'll just jump in the Jean Bar and
exactly.
You know, I know you can snipe with it, but it's so boring. It doesn't matter that you get 200k and Deadeye your way to glory, because it's dull. Because all you do is sit there, wait, 25 seconds go by, click. Yeah, and then you wait a bit and you're like, meh, RNG, meh, 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 and then click. It's just, you know, and I think that's why I have to really sarcastically say kudos, because you've managed that, you know, whoever decided to go for this in this way, you've managed to make it, to take it to the point where ships like that are not really, they're not entertaining. They don't engage, to use the fun and engaging. phrase. So, and as I said, as an Asasio lover, whatever that makes me, I never really ever expected that you'd be able to bring it to the point where even some of those games are not fun. So well done.
Another winner in this is another subset of destroyers, gunboats, because I don't think there's ever been more room for destroyers to do knife fighting with each other. And that's fun, by all means, but it's such a tiny subset of all the ships out there. But
that's what you have to do now, Tiger, is you have to go looking. So how do I still have a laugh in the Asasio? Well, one, I'm very fortunate to be part of an incredible community that bear with us through thick and thin, no matter what the game throws at us.
Hell yeah.
And they make it fun, right? So they're, for me, the missing ingredient. I'm sure it's the same for you.
Shout out to the people who show up for the grumbling. Yeah,
exactly. And but what I do to counteract this problem is, firstly, I'm playing a lot more DDs because at least I can have fun in a DD, whereas I struggle in the other classes at the moment. And what I do in the DDs is it just feeds my sort of aggressive play style. I go looking, I hunt fun, if you will. I'm not so much hunting other DD or whatever, but I'm looking for those scraps so that I'm not bored out of my mind trying to find a way to flank round the back and find all the battleships sitting in spawn or guarding the treasure in A10, as I like to say. The most valuable coordinates on the grid of a world. Apparently, that's where the treasure's hidden.
Yeah, I do completely agree, though. Like, it's so frustrating because I've loved this game for so long. Yeah, I've had breaks, but this is really hard for me to sit down and love, honestly. And it's because of so many things. And this is sort of a good transition into the next topic that I want to talk about. Something that has always really ground my gears in World of Warships is the matchmaker. The +2 or -2 matchmaker, all depending on how you see it. Yeah, spreadsheet says it's working and everything is fine. No, it's not. Wargaming says, okay, yeah, well, we can't have a better matchmaker because if we do that, then it'll take longer to get a match. I think there's not a single player out there that would say, oh no, longer queue times, if they also knew that they would get either a +-1 matchmaker or, let's say, equal matchmaking. And honestly, if they were to introduce an equal matchmaker so that when you go in a tier 9, you get nothing but tier 9s. When you go in a tier 8, you get nothing but tier 8s. I think that could also solve a lot of the issues that they have. One of these issues being the amount of battleships just falling back, or the amount of cruisers fucking off from a flank because they're afraid of the battleships. How many times have you met a Musashi while you're in a tier 7?
Yeah.
How many times has that gone well for you?
Yeah, I've also I do like playing my Musashi, and I'm sure an element of that comes from the fact that I'm often top dog in a 7, 8, 9.
I'll be fully on board with that, and I won't deny it's really a lot of fun to delete Atlantas in your Musashi. There are plenty of clips of me doing that, but for that Atlanta player sitting there and then being just deleted from existence, you've literally been Thanos'd, and then you're back to port, like fun and engaging. I honestly do think that a lot of the problems with Deadeye and such, and the ships that sit at the back would be solved then, because at least the ships that sit at the back and are able to pull these shots are equal to your tier.
Well, I think that. So, firstly, I do tend to agree. But I think that there are a couple of other nuances to it, though. I think that, and I'm sure you'll agree with this. I think that the matchmaking, the way it currently is, and or more to the point, why don't they change it? And yeah, I'm speculating, but given a lot of what's come to light recently, and you know, five plus years of experience, I think that the matchmaking, as it is, somewhat masks other underlying problems, namely that there are a quite significant number of ships that are imbalanced.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, talking specifically about the idea of adjusting the matchmaker, probably one of the first things I'd do is I'd make tier 10 exclusively tier 10. Because
yes, please.
A lot of the problem with being up tiered against 10s, and there's several tier 9s that can attest to this. Musashi, funnily enough, is not one of them. But, you know, here's looking at you, Fat Freddy, as an example. There are ships that are just inadequate when it comes to being able to compete against the tier 10 ships on the basis of approximately equal levels of player skill and RNG evening out during the course of a battle, which, you know, I have no way of telling how often it evens out, whatever, right? So, because, you know, random number generator, but it's like random with whatever, you know, offset. Yeah, it's never going to be fully. Anyway, so I think that because a lot of the tier 10 ships are just ridiculously powerful, in this case, let's talk about the extremes, the tier 8s versus tier 10s. That's why that feels like it sucks, because you will be N amount of HP less from the get-go. You will have N amount of guns and or caliber shell penetration, whatever the mechanic is, you will be that much weaker. Being hit by a couple of Shima Torps in a North Carolina is a lot less comfortable than being hit by a couple of Shima Torps in a Kreml.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's, you know, what are you going to do about it? And so, of course, what do you do about it? Well, that, you know, well, that's the nature of the progression in the game. Yes. So let's have tier 10s be exclusively tier 10, or let's have that as a battle mode. I think there's no real way talking about players volunteering for a certain battle mode. I think that tier 10 should fight tier 10s, right?
Yeah, completely agree.
You could make it 9 and 10, but there are a few tier 9s that are awesome, and there are a few tier 9s that are quite woeful, or inadequate. So again, this is where I think the problem comes in. Then the idea of the +-1 matchmaking becomes, I think, a lot more appealing and a lot more effective, because 8s and 9s, there's a couple of outliers like a Jean Bart, like a Musashi, but generally speaking, your 8s and 9s can have a good tussle.
Yeah.
Your 7s can, but you're asking for, you know, it's difficult to say it, but ultimately, not necessarily a better player, but a player having a better game. Let's put it that way. So you need to go in with a 7 with the mindset of, if I get 9s, what can I do? How do I adapt my playstyle and so forth? This leads me, I don't want to get too off on a tangent, but that leads me to another topic that's correlated to this stuff, which is that I'm very, very worried about player progression and what the game does to try to encourage improving as a player, and how you recognize and see that you're improving over time. That is, you know, entirely left up to you, with a smidgen of salt from the rest of the player base to tell you that you haven't improved at any given point in time.
Yeah.
Or that because you had one bad game or one bad moment in maybe a good game, that you're a complete, you know, I had this case in point yesterday evening in a game off stream where a couple of tier 10 allies, and I was a tier 10 as well, decided to tell me that I wasn't particularly good because I wasn't in my CV perma spotting a Haaland.
Yeah.
And they were not interested in the logic of why I was maybe struggling to perma spot the Harlan. Anyway, it turned out afterwards that they were, let's say, statistically not as experienced and capable as they might have thought of. Anyway, not to digress too far, but I think this does, again, in a more or less things are not equal, but in an even kind of spectrum, which is another problem that the matchmaking or matchmaking can't really solve it. But it's another problem in the game is that given all of these variables like skill level, experience level, and so forth, the imbalance between the ships then becomes a decisive factor. And that's why I think, and I don't want to irritate people, but tough if you get irritated by this, I think that's where a lot of the toxicity and moaning about being up tiered comes from, is that, well, actually, you probably haven't, I don't think a player that is genuinely progressing and doing well and comfortable with their skill level goes into the game in a tier 7 against a tier 9, and the first thing they do is write in the global chat and bellyache about matchmaking, because they think, okay, this is going to be challenging. They might not be super happy about it, but like, okay, I need to think about this. I need to be not too aggressive here. There's going to be radars that's, with different ranges. There's going to be higher calibers hitting me. Let's think about where I can position my ship and how to play this, right? So, and then there's the vast majority that go in thinking that they've got some Odin given right to be brilliant and not be shot by anything and never get radared and whatever, right? So, and I think that a lot of that stems, and I should have thrown this in, but I didn't think of it until now. But I do see this worrying, and I would say it's a downward trend, that as much as I don't spend too much time worrying about statistics, the statistics worry me to the extent that I'm seeing a lot of what you would probably end up categorizing as below average numbers for it feels like a growing number of players coming to the game, and they're just not progressing. And what it's none of my business, right? You could argue that point, but trying to talk about it for the health of the game and the health of the community, you everyone can have a good, bad, or otherwise game, but you need to be, that's the point of it, is to progress, not in the sense of the tech tree progression, but to actually get to tier 10 and feel confident and knowledgeable and kind of know a little bit of what you're doing. You can still derp. That's perfectly part of it, but I don't know how people are going to get fun at the higher tiers if during their progression they've basically just like quick ground their way through, or kind of ignored getting any better or paying it, and I don't think there's enough that the game does to encourage you to get better. So there you go. Anyway, so I don't think the matchmaking can solve it, but I think the +-1 would help. I think that I would do it on a class. I would start with CVs. I would eradicate the multiple CVs in a battle ever at any tier.
Oh my god.
And I would
I've forgotten about that
CVs
even.
to be +-1 tier, which might mean wargaming. Hey, what about bringing back, the Bogue and the Hiriaku, or whatever it was called, and all the other ones where that are missing. That's not the name of it, but you know the one I mean. What about bringing the odd tier CVs back without charging us an arm and a leg, and then we can have +-1 matchmaking.
Problem there is that the entire community will go, oh, but then we'll have CVs in every match. Yes. Would you rather end up having 2 CVs in every 7 matches? Because I see it happen more and more often. And that I get 2 tier 8 CVs in the same game. What happens then? What happens then to the game? And I'm one of those that yes, I enjoy the CV. I think it has a spot in the game. But at that moment when I see 2 tier 8 CVs in my same game, I go, fuck this. I'm not on board with this. I really don't like it. I'd rather have a radar on every last single ship on the enemy team in that case. That's a different thing I want to talk about, but yeah.
They're all the black or the Smarland.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I didn't want to divert too much into that direction because it's this whole podcast all in itself.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that, as again, going back, linking this back to the Flamu topic, you can see the problem. You know, we all now know the awful truth, as it were, right? Tongue in cheek a little bit, but there's, you know, there's half true, half tongue in cheek. Ultimately, they need it financially to make sense, and therefore they buff and adjust accordingly to make CVs viable and comfortable. You know, the game I mentioned earlier where people were two people were complaining, you know, I was in the atrocious, the audacious, and it wasn't upgraded. It's an absolutely terrible CV. Tier 10. You know, also, what's the point of having to upgrade your ship when you get anyway?
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to upgrade your Kreml.
No, exactly.
So why do you have to upgrade your CV anyway? But CVs are, you know, handled differently. They're a protected species, whatever, yada yada yada. Ultimately, they've got some mechanics that they haven't found a solution for. I do think the plus minus one matchmaking could help if it does mean more CVs in games. I don't know. Is that a problem? Should we have more games where DD doesn't turn up in the matchmaker? We get them occasionally. Should they? Do we just have games where the matchmaker gives you no destroyers, no cruisers, no battleships? You know, not all at once, but like round robin style or whatever.
Yeah.
They could introduce something and saying, like they did with if you've been up tiered so many games, you then are guaranteed to get a few games in a row where you're not up tiered or whatever, right? Or where you're top tier. So they brought that in. Could they bring something in that says if you get 3 games in a row with CV, you're guaranteed to get 2 games in a row without a CV or something? I you know,
yeah,
whatever
they probably could. They probably could, but then they will be going against their own argument. Oh, but the queue times. We can't let people sit in queue. Fuck you. Yes, do it. Let people sit in queues. However, there is another really big thing that they could do to solve all their queue time issues. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. War Thunder does this, and I've realized just how genius it is. Why are there even regions? War Thunder has regional servers, yeah, but that's so you can get optimal ping and such. But there are Russian servers, there are US servers, and there are European servers. I can play with everyone that signs up for War Thunder. I don't have to make a separate account if I want to play with Angry Soul Shaker who's from NA. And it's like, sometimes the queue time takes a long time, yeah, because suddenly everybody's sitting in their German tanks at battle rating 5 and waiting for something to pop up. But what happens with the servers then is, let's say I've chosen just the European servers. Okay, 4 minutes pass. Then it suddenly goes, okay, we're going to look across all servers, both US and Russian. And then we're going to find you a match. If we still don't find a proper matchmaking, because they try to have Axis versus Allies or appropriate matches, but finally they just go, okay, we're going to make a mixed match. It's going to be everybody against everybody on these teams now. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Because I know that in the end, when I get into a match, I have no problem playing. I can play with whoever I want. And another thing that happens is that usually I then end up with only vehicles at the same battle rating as me. Because the matchmaker went, okay, this is suboptimal right now. This is suboptimal. Well, we're gonna apply this filter then, because that is the best way of making it optimal, despite the other things not being there. On top of that, and you talked about learning. You talked about learning as part of your progression and how to get up and forward and knowing that you get better. I'm going to throw something from War Thunder out there again. The ability to spawn in several times. One of the best ways I've ever learned in a game is by being able to say, okay, my Jachtiger, I went on that flank, I got shot from there because he hit me at that position of my tank. Alright? I'm going to do something silly. I'm going to go to that exact same position. However, I'm going to angle slightly. Suddenly, the shots just dink off me and I'm able to put shots down range and kill. Learning moments, learning experience, like everything. And this starts to add up. And that's something that I didn't know I needed and I didn't know I wanted, but here I am.
Yeah, I think they would obviously, you know, they've built their game on this basis. I think that switch would be probably too difficult for them, or at least they'd have to make that in degrees. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is not something you just turn off overnight.
But I agree with you. It made me think, just like the idea of that's talking about the 789s again as an example, is like, well, you could ready up a 7, an 8, and a 9, and then you go into battle and you see what everyone's taking in, and then you could pick, okay, I'm going to take my 7 in or something. To start with, or whatever, or maybe they have to be different classes and stuff like that, because, you know, I think that would help in the circumstances, as you said, for the learning experience, that and improving as a player. If you have that derpy moment, right, and if you want to see what that looks like, twitch.tv grumbles the dwarf every weekend. You can come and watch a lot of them, but you have that kind of like, oh, the torps are going to be here, I shouldn't, oh I went there, okay, cool. Yeah, and you know, and you've kind of screwed yourself and your team and whatever, and maybe it was like the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game, and it happens, and then you feel like a klutz, and if you're silly, you stay in the game and you watch the battle and you get to read about how terrible all the other players think you are, or you move on, you know. So yeah. I think there's that. I mean, maybe one of the other things we've talked about in the past is that maybe they restrict the chat so that you can talk to your div mates and your team for like 2 minutes after death, and then they stop it. This is slightly tangent to this, but that would encourage people to drop back out to port again, because there's nothing else to, you know, they can whine all they want, but they can't interact with anyone, so you get them out of there. Or you can just spectate, and that would probably get a significant proportion of players to drop back to port, grab another ship, and then go back into the matchmaking system again. The other thing about the wait times and that, well, I play on NA and there's loads of waiting on there anyway, compared to EU, because there simply isn't the base, or because of the way the mechanics of the matchmaking work, you're waiting because, funnily enough, they're trying to slot CVs in wherever they can so that people don't lose interest in playing that class that they've spent a lot of money on, blah, 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 right? So but I think I always refer to this because it really struck a chord with me, is World of Tanks CC Sophie line, and she said that fundamentally Wargaming's games are built ground up to reward the individual, and not team play and all the achievement. Everything is about you as a person, so that you feel nice and pandered to in your ego and whatever, or it feeds your delusional nature. And that is a problem. And I think that this is what I mean a little bit about the reboot, and I guess it's a nice way to segue and connect the dots between the different topics. Ultimately, you know, Wargaming have really, really core issues, I think, with their Warships product, and how they're going to keep the thing not just alive by pumping it full of steroids or whatever, and massaging the heart every 6 months, or every month with some patch that nobody asked for. But how do they actually how are they going to reinvigorate and bring this fun factor back in? And I think that they don't have the answer to that right now. They think that they think the answer to that is bringing new people in who don't know about all the traps and woes, and also by just delivering the new content. And maybe that's the segue to the next point. I don't know.
It very much is, because like the matchmaker and the captain rework and such, these are core issues. These are something they need to work on. And honestly, when I say need, I think I should instead say must. Because if they don't, they're gonna lose a lot of people. What they instead are doing is like they are creating a content saturation with what's going on. You said it yourself. Content patch after content patch after content patch being pushed out. Like you don't even let your players kind of sit down and enjoy and grind through it, and so on. You just push more stuff. Do this grind, do that grind. They keep pushing grinds. And I say this because I stopped playing Warships after the Untitled for quite some time. Because it was the nth grind that they put out in a row. There was no break. There was no this was no long time grind either. Like it was just this insane 2-week grind that you needed to do. If you wanted the ship, you have to do it now. There's no wait time on it. You can't say okay.
One of the worst they did, yeah.
Yeah, and they kept on doing this, and they're still doing it. The Italian battleships being a wonderful point in that. The counterpoint there is, of course, you don't have to grind them now. You can grind these later. Yeah, and I'm all aboard with that. But they are introducing this as a grind after having done the dockyard. So everybody's in that mindset. And you have to grind these missions, you have to do this, and everybody wants everything early, of course, because it's new content. And I think one of the best ways of solving this, and honestly, this is also kind of a core issue here. One of my favorite grinds in the game was to get Yamamoto Isoroku. The special Japanese captain, which you did in a long chain of missions. Like we're talking, this is a massive grind, really, because you keep doing mission after mission after mission to try to meet these conditions. It's not you have to grind X amount of base XP within a week. No, it is get 250 kills with a battleship or something like that, or make sure that you get top of the team within these parameters. But you're not restricted in time. And I think that's the main issue why I like that grind as opposed to really hate the others. Because I don't feel like I have to do it right there and then. It's something that'll pop up. I can properly focus on it and try to go in with ships that'll help me do it. But it's not something I feel I have to do. And then suddenly I'll be rewarded with this. I'm like, yes! God, awesome! I got it! It doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like a reward, you know? It feels like, hey, you've done the thing. Congratulations. And then you can celebrate and you can take him out and whatever and reap the benefits of that. As opposed to, here, do this massive grind so you can pay us more money. Dockyard. You know? They are constantly pushing out new stuff without allowing people to calm down and enjoy it. And that's a big issue for me right now.
Yep. I think that's true. I think pacing, I mean, this is something I've recognized in other games where, and I'd never really paid enough attention to it, but looking back, it's kind of one of the most important, if not the most important and obvious thing, is the pacing of a game. And it's different depending on the type of, the genre, whatever. Some things are like a very heavy story. you know, like within reason, like something like Valhalla, you probably wouldn't want to play that like if it took you an entire year or say 2 years or something like that to get through, then there might be something wrong with that pacing. But you know, you'd want to have enough content that you could keep people coming back, play it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Or like Lacey Lilith, who's played Red Dead Redemption 2, I think 107 times by now. You know, because there's enough about it and whatever, right? But this kind of game, it's got its hooks into everybody, and you've got that mixture of enjoying the game, but also the psychological, you know, it's like a drug or whatever, an addiction of sorts, right? So, but I think what they've done, or what we're talking about here, is about the pacing of the content. I used to praise wargaming. This is aimed more like, you know, a year or 2 ago and before that, for keeping their incredible schedule. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about a monthly patch for, you know, and the amount of, but the content that used to come along, and I may just be, I don't have a good memory anyway, and it's a bit of nostalgia or whatever, but the content used to be, for me, more balanced between, here's a new map, here's some graphics changes or whatever we've made, here's a couple of new boats or a new line or something, or it wasn't a new line every time, or I didn't feel like it. But here's also a bunch of balance changes we've made. We've adjusted these 15 ships with these parameters and like that. And it felt like every monthly patch, say a year or 2 ago, and before then, was more of a mixture of content, a bundle that could appeal to the broad player base. Some new stuff for those that wanted new stuff, some resolving of various bugs and balance issues for the long-term players or those that were more interested in that, and a few things of aesthetics and sounds and whatnot to appeal, you know, to people like me that like the visuals and that kind of thing. And now it seems much more to have been about just pumping out, as you said, new lines, but also this mechanic. I don't know exactly when they brought it in, maybe the Benham or before then, but this thing about like, well, if you just put a few euros in, you can get a leg up or whatever, or look, there's this thing here for like 1 million doubloons that you can have the best thing ever, except if you read the small print, it's probably not all that good, or probably get bored of it 5 minutes later. I mean, there's a smoke and mirrors aspect for a business that they don't want you to think along the lines of the reality, which is, oh, you get this Heisen, it's great, and then you'll probably play it once or twice a day, and then it'll wear off a bit, and you'll wonder why you spent all that time grinding the Heisen out, because it can't be that good, because if it was that good, they do a Musashi and just ban it and pull it from the shop again or whatever, right? So, you know, that's the smoke and mirrors, is that they want everyone to be suckered into the spending the time, because they know the more time you spend there, but things are just out of reach, the more likely you're going to buy the premium time, the more likely you're going to buy some doubloons or a few containers and whatnot, right? So, and I there's the part of it where you're like, well, as a business, well, wouldn't you just eke out wherever you can? And I think this then loops back to the previous topics, especially the first one, which is, well, no, because if your player base are actually engaged and having enough fun,
exactly,
then your content kind of sort of speaks for itself and is guided by that connection with the player base and your CCs and STs and everything else in the streamer community. And then there's so much information that becomes super easy to say, oh, if we just pick that bit and that bit and that bit, and that'll go in the next patch. And most people, 80% of the player base, are going to be super happy with those 3 items, and we can make that affordable. We can make that achievable by more. But I think, to go back to the pacing and what you mentioned, I love those campaigns. I don't like that they're totally hidden away. I know there's the campaign button now on the main, but the UI is a problem. It takes forever to load, and honestly, campaigns, I'm looking at my screen now. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 7th one is campaigns. Then there's 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 items in that list on the left that you get to look at that loads horrible and slow and whatever. And the 7th one, so this tells you something about where they want your attention, right? So the 7th one down is the campaign. So that means it's almost irrelevant. right?
Yeah.
The one below that is containers. It's got double the amount of space or 3 times the amount of space. And you'll look at it because it highlights or whatever. And the campaign one will give you a little star eventually at some point, right? The rest of it is under the profile button and the menu at the top. And then you've got to go to the campaigns and look for them and all that, right? So they even remove that campaign button up there. I know they'll say, well, it's on the left now. Stop being stupid, Grumbles. But the thing is, you deliberately and subtly make some things prominent and hide other things away. And for a while, they refused to even put new campaigns. They barely brought any in. Then they suddenly came with a couple, and then they even did the dirty on us and brought one in for Jersey McDurpsky, I think that's how you pronounce his name, where they then made that time limited.
Yeah.
And gave everybody a sour taste in their mouth about campaign. So one of the few things where we would have said as a player base, hey, it's really cool to have these long-term, just chip away at it. You'll get there when you get there. A few people will go and mega grind it because that's what they're into or the way their brain works. But most people will just chip. Or a lot of people actually don't even know they're there and don't fulfill those missions and miss out on those captains or whatever they get from, because it's so well hidden.
Quick point regarding those campaigns and such. Making them long term, making them be things that are achievable over a long time, an added benefit for, and looking at this as a business, added benefit there for wargaming is that you get repeat customers on premium time. You get repeat customers on doubloons, because people who play not that often, they will probably buy doubloons and then use that to buy premium time once in a while. Mm-hmm. Whereas people who want the long-term grind and do that, they'll buy premium time for 30 days at a time or a year at a time or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they'll just let that tick and buy a new one, because you'll use that as you go in your grind. But suddenly you're throwing this entire system of purchasing even more stuff on top of it, and forcing people to do it quicker, like with Jerry Zvirsky or whatever his name was, the pan-European captain.
Zvirsky, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's so frustrating, because you're no longer feeling like you're being rewarded. You're feeling like you're being punished. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the pacing of things. I know Wargaming are a company and they're here to make money, but having worked in IT for 12, 13 years and always being focused on the customer satisfaction of things, the best way of knowing that a customer will buy more of your services, more of what you're doing, is by delivering a good service to them. A good base product that you know that they enjoy. And one of the best ways of getting that product is by talking to your customers, listening to them as they say, okay, this is something that we want. Mm-hmm. Let's pick something from our community, something we want. More co-op stuff, more stuff that makes PvE fun and challenging, more modes there. That is something that I know a lot of us around our community, at least, TC, Grumpy, and a lot of the Bobs, a lot of the people in my community have said, we want more PvE stuff for variation. And then if Wargaming were to listen to them, okay, what would happen? Okay, we'd get more PvE stuff. That would make the longevity of the game even bigger, because you sit down and then you go, okay, randoms. No, I'm not into randoms today. Now I want to play some of the operations. And then you play some operations, you get some rewards for that, and then you go, oh shit, I need XP. And XP is always going to be better in random battles. So you go back to randoms. And then you have this natural flow of things. You can do things in PvE, enjoy that, and then you can go in randoms and do that thing. And like, it's not a game that is around the long-term satisfaction of people anymore. Like, it's instant gratification through the fact that you can purchase the Hizen and others, but you are not you're not properly being rewarded for your long-term dedication to it anymore, I feel. And yeah, no, it's I think one of the better changes they ever did was to introduce these micro missions where, okay, get 1100 base XP over a day. Sure. And then you can keep on doing these small grinds. But then you're done with that mission. You don't have to worry about that. Like it shouldn't have to be on your mind that, oh, I need to do these insane grinds every single time. No, it's something that is doable within a day through normal playing. Promote a proper and normal way of playing, and you won't have customers that are worn out. Because let's face it, that's what we are. We're customers. We're not only players, we're customers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the key to it, and it links with the pacing thing. Is a vast majority of, let's say maybe it's a critical mass is the right term, or the right term to abuse in this case. There's a critical mass of the player base that are suffering fatigue.
Yes.
With the game as a result of all of the things we've talked about, and probably a few we haven't deliberately or accidentally gone over. And I think that probably all boils down to this disconnect. It's either and I don't want to really, I hope it's not this, but either there's this wanton disregard by the company because they're like, well, I mean, there's an element of this where, let's be realistic, generationally or whatever, you're dealing with World War I, World War II, and it's 2021. They're doing pretty good. They've got a lot of people still interested in all this stuff, and they've probably got another, maybe 10 years or whatever. I don't know what's the lifespan of it, but maybe 10, maybe they don't. Maybe they see it and they're like, let's cut and run and take what we can. I hope that's not it. Or there'd be a little element of that, but a much bigger part is just this kind of ignorance of this disconnect, right? And then the refusal to address that disconnect. I'm not entirely sure what they're afraid of. I suppose there's an argument that they're nervous. They don't want to set the wrong precedents and end up, I think Flamba said this once. He said that often wargaming give too much stuff away for free, in a sense, through a lot of this in-game earnable or free camos and that kind of thing. But again, I think then that they need to look at this fatigue issue. And as much as you want people playing your game all the time, any minute of the day that they have spare, I think I link that to the point you made before about is this healthy? Is this are people playing this game in a healthy state of mind? And I think that's where a lot of the toxicity, a lot of the bad stuff that happens in the chat, and bad play even as an extension of that. Sometimes I had one once where a DD would just come and torpedo me. Well, I'm like, what are you doing? He's on my team. Like, what are you doing? Like, well, you're in a CV and I hate CVs. Like, what?
Oh, great. Yeah.
So they literally came in a clever and torpedoed me. It's like the most ridiculous thing ever. But and I think that these things come to some extent from this disconnect topic and the fatigue that everyone's under. And then that links to the content saturation where they're bringing a lot of content, cool, but is it the right content? Is it healthy for the game? Linking that back to the players progressing and learning and feeling comfortable and confident in the game. All these little triggers or mines in the minefield that every time you step on something like that, you become a little bit more toxic, a little bit more tired or worn out by the game, and you tend to walk away. And I think that links to what you were saying earlier with streamers leaving, very kind of appropriately, is that people are, I'm not playing the game as much as I did before. You're not people and let alone streaming it. We stream it more because we have this loyal community. People like to see this content, and we still love the game intrinsically, but it's wearing us down.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy. And I think that people are leaving. You're seeing so many people now who are streaming other content. And I think that if wargaming, if they're honest and they're awake, which they're two very different things, but they must surely be aware that that's happening and that they can't just magic up another. There's more people streaming than ever before, and that's become much more accessible, and that's a cool thing. But having 1,000 people streaming, how do I broach the subject without seeming, having 1,000 people streaming your game to 1 or 2 people each, who also are probably not progressing, probably not learning the game and developing further. Is that where you want to be, just to say that in your spreadsheet you've got the total number of viewers and the numbers? I mean, looking, things like Valheim maybe is a bit of an outlier as well, a bit of an exception, but there's many categories or games that are outstripping World of Warships.
Oh, big time.
And then you look at the World of Warships official streams, or at least the EU one, and you see how toxic that is. And, I haven't been to one of those streams in a good couple of years now, properly. Certainly not for more than like 3 or 4 minutes, because I simply can't stand the chat and what's going on there. Because I don't like to be brought down by that negativity.
Which is so strange, because pretty much all the other chats out there for the World of Warships community, for people who stream World of Warships, are fantastic places to be. Good people hanging out, having a good chat, both about the game, and we're talking a productive conversation about it. But and then you're in game, and then that's a whole different sphere. But let's roll back a bit. Few years to how World of Warship was. The grind and the base game was basically, your goal is to get a tier 10. How do you get there? You play. You play and you play and you play. And so many people were happy doing that. And then they introduced these micro tasks and so on, and people were happy with that. But suddenly it kind of tipped over at some point, where there's too much going on. There's too much being introduced, where you don't know what you want to do. Like you feel like you don't have time to finish something. You're suddenly like, case in point here is, I'm still not done with my Hindenburg. I'm still on the rune. How long ago did they release the German cruisers? How long ago did they release the Pan-Asian destroyers? This is content I still haven't done, because there's always been something new coming out. And if I want to feel relevant and feel like I'm on top and get to enjoy it as it is, and when it's on its height, well, I need to be on top of that grind instantly. And yeah, like you said, this whole thing about them giving away too much free stuff, by all means, yeah, I'm not saying that they should give away everything for free, but it's that incentive. For instance, Yamamoto is a Roku. He's a free captain you can get, but he adds so much to that one big ship we all know and love, the Yamato, with the way he transforms its use. He adds a lot to the Shima. He adds a lot to the Zao. So that means suddenly you have an incentive to kind of put him into all of these ships. And, well, to put him into these ships, you need to have them. There's your long-term grind. Yep. Nothing is given away for free except that one captain. But there's your long-term grind that people are happy to do without having to rush it, without having to hide it behind micro transactions that really aren't micro in wargaming's case. Let's be fair. And yeah, you said something about listening to communities and such, and having good pacing and making sure that the customer base is happy.
Mm-hmm.
This will actually bring us on to the next topic in a wonderful way. Role-playing games.
Yep.
If we look at I just want to shoot this in here before I let you go on this, because this was the topic you wanted to talk about. But if we look at how Wizards of the Coast, and the Paizo behind Pathfinder, and a lot of others have developed their games, and we're talking pen and paper type role-playing games here. They have developed good systems that work well, loyal player base that can do things over and over and over with the same game system, but from time to time releasing new books or slight variations, and then keeping the the community happy by giving them access to miniatures or additions. I remember the first time I got access to I can't remember what the book is called, but for my human fighter, and suddenly having all these new weapons and toys to play with. I think it's the Ultimate Adventurer's Guide or something for D&D 3.5. So much new stuff in that. Holy shit, that book was cool. And new feats, new ways of using feats and such. And that made me want to play another fighter. And it's just, yeah, role-playing games, man.
Yeah.
What a way. What a way to live.
What they've done well is not only engage the community, but really like embrace them. I know that's like their market base or whatever. Yes. So, but the genuine kind of care and attention and I think obviously now there's this some more emphasis maybe on some of the books and stories and whatnot, but the core of it previously was how do we get this out there to as many people as possible, because we really believe in our product and we believe that this will help get people using their imagination, making friends, and just being able to have that abstraction away from whatever real life is throwing at them and stuff, and I think that's what that's kind of like the key to their success is that it's 100% customizable. They give the books and everything as a baseline, as a guide, and say, but ultimately, right from page 1 or whatever all the way to the back, it'll be like, don't be bound by what this book says. If you like a thing or you get a thing or you don't, do your own thing. And I think people like Chris Perkins and that have just like really lived that and demonstrated it and shown, and the way they took their podcasts, funnily enough, and live shows and things on the road and introduced that to newer and bigger audiences and things over time, and start to bring more technology in. And now you've got your D&D Beyonds and all this other stuff. And like, one of the key things is so much of that content is also free to access. Yeah. They have their paid stuff as well, but the core of it is all accessible from day one to now, 30, 40 years later or whatever. And I think that there's, because we would just chuckle and smirk and laugh ourselves silly at the idea of wargaming free to play as a comparison or whatever. I think that, I mean, clearly different genres and whatnot, and I've tried to bring some role play experience into what do we do on World of Warships, and we'll do a little bit with our voice modding and playing up to different characters and ideas and stuff. And it's nice to see a few different people who've taken on some of that as well. Because ultimately, using your imagination and feeling like you're creating something, even, as a player, you don't have to be a streamer. is much more powerful and emotional and bonding than anything that the creators will ever really come up with themselves. The stuff they bring is exciting and has this pizzazz and like the art department for WoWs, we're always talking about how great they are. It's awesome, but that's only, or the best part of that is what you then trigger in people to imagine themselves, or sparks their interest. Like, oh wow, the ship art looks amazing. Let me go and look at the history of it, or what was the captain like of that ship, or what did they eat when they were out on long patrols, and whatever the random question. And so I think there's a strong overlap to role playing, and what I've certainly enjoyed in the last couple of years is not just the tabletop experience, but also being able to role play in video games. Has been a real eye opener as well, and something very enjoyable. And but why I wanted to kind of bring this up and sort of shift topics slightly was. But maybe also draw the comparisons and make some connections, is just what a difference that can make using your imagination, being creative, and then kind of lending that or leaning out into the community and asking people to to grasp what you're throwing out there as an idea, and have them throw ideas and guide and develop and be creative together. And
nodding approvingly in the background here, just so that's said.
Yeah, exactly. So and I think that's just so empowering for everybody. And I think that there's some serious lessons that could be learned from that, and that might be maybe we get Wizards of the Coast or whatever, maybe get some people to go and just role play and play some games with the people over at Wargaming Central, and have a think about, like, just be creative and abstract yourself away from normality for 5 minutes, and then think about what look at and reflect on what that might bring back into that space. But yeah, I wanted to talk about role playing just for a hot minute or two, just in terms of exactly this collaborative, creative experience that you can create, and also the safe space that you can create, because people, giving people the opportunity to kind of just express something, some thought or idea or whatever came along, in a space where you welcome that and you encourage it and you kind of applaud and recognize it. I think that's a good thing, and I think that we need, in this modern era as well, we're all kind of interconnected, but it's also this virtual and the distance that's kind of built into that. It's a way of getting beyond that barrier and getting into each other's kind of sort of frame of mind, or into that creative process together. I think is a really, really healthy and cathartic thing. So I wanted to talk about it also almost as an appeal to people, like, to try this stuff out, because people I was very nervous about it. I can't remember how many, because I've only been doing D&D and playing like on Roll20 and in online like groups and things. But at the beginning, I can't remember. I must have created like half a dozen character sheets or whatever, and watched a load of YouTubes and looked up on websites and, whoa, what is a wizard supposed to do, and what does this mean, and what even is a dwarf, and all that kind of stuff. But learning by doing, and then just starting to create. And at first, it's very formulaic. It's very like, well, you're going to be a ranger, so you should pick an elf because they've got this stat, and you want to put loads of points in your decks, and then
sorry, this is the throat thing.
It wasn't min-maxing, but I was like, I just didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, I know.
And then realizing that actually it's even funnier if you're like a halfling who's lost an arm, so he can't use his bow anymore. So he sees a gnome inventor who comes up with a mechanism that auto loads his cross.
Exactly.
And you go in that way, and also it doesn't matter if you miss. Or it makes it more exciting, and that failing, so you can kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move forward with it. And I wanted to kind of appeal to people.
Yeah, for all the faults of World of Warships with RNG, for us as role players, it's based on RNG after all. And like, jumping off that whole creativity thing that you mentioned, one thing I usually do when I lead a group is that I I give them quirky and weird magic items. There's one thing that people so far haven't figured out that I've started to have to actively tell them what it does. I give them a stick.
Mm-hmm.
For the modern day man, this looks oddly like a cocktail stick. Because it is. Stick it in a glass of water or a container or anything, and then you roll a d10, and then you get some random drink. If you're really lucky, it'll be a really good drink. If you're really, really unlucky, well, you'll have last day's fermented grog or something. and I often introduce characters that sell these completely useless magical items. I once introduced a goblin-like character.
Mm-hmm.
He was a bit of a fun guy. Because he was originally released from a dungeon by the original party. So of course they already knew him when they saw him. It's like, hey, it's him! Wait! So they built a whole kind of relationship there. And he goes, come on into my shop. Let me show you how to get here. A very World of Warcraft kind of inspired goblin. And then one guy was like, hey, that steel rod over there. Oh yeah, you can't move it. Oh really? That sounds handy. Oh, okay. You want it? He was like, yeah. Oh, 2,000 gold. Pays 2,000 gold. Guy goes, told you can't move it. But well, I paid for it. Yeah, it's stuck here. Can't help you, bud. It's stuck here, but you paid for it. I won't sell it to anybody else, but it's stuck here. You can have it at any point when you get back here. Just let me know. You can't have it with you. I'm sorry. That sort of thing. Like just this immovable object, that slightly quirky magical item, and so on. And the ability to create this, but that's something that kind of stops me when it comes to role playing in a computerized world. Because everything is kind of bound to the setting. Everything is kind of set in its way. But I really wish that I could go ahead and say, all right, I have this magical sword that now when I walk around and I hit the piles of dirt or whatever, they suddenly turn into blue piles of dirt. Why? Because I want to. Does it have a functional effect? Maybe, because that's part of the thing. Give people a magical item and then challenge them to use it in a proper way. Use it in a way that suddenly this thing saves lives. You've mentioned a couple of podcasts, I follow a couple of channels on TikTok that does this, where one of them, it is a notorious kind of DM versus the group, but it's done in a fun way in that group. Normally, I'm not aboard with that, but it's done in a very fun way in this group. Where one of the players goes, hey, can I use this item that spins me around to lift myself out of this big bottomless pit you've thrown me into? And you see the DM go, okay. And then it's like, and he has this dice box of doom, where if you throw your dice in this, and you don't make the throw, then the box, like, it stays in the box. You can't use that anymore for the rest of the session. And he was like, okay, 19 and above on the die. 19 and above on the D20, and you can fly out of here with this magical sword, and this works. Natural 20.
Wow.
So this guy, he then uses his longsword to kind of helicopter himself out of this bottomless pit, and you can see this DM is like, never thought this was come back and haunt me. God dang it. And it's so good.
What have I done to myself?
Yeah. And you reach so many with this. You reach so many. Like, one thing I love about computerized role-playing games is just that, the reach. Like, you are probably one of the better examples of this for me. I found you as a Warships player, but suddenly there's this giant community of role players playing Eco, Valheim, Conan, Ark, Lost Oasis, and they all have these weird, quirky personalities that you just kind of fall in love with and listen to, and that again, it reaches out so far and wide, and it's so cool. So yeah,
it's a lot of fun. I'm totally with you. Funnily enough, my biggest bugbear with role playing in a video game is exactly the one you mentioned, that people limit their imagination. I'm going to say something that sounds like contradictory. Some people are incredibly inventive and creative with what they can do, but it's almost always limited to the assets that they're presented with in the game.
Yeah.
And a lot of players are competent role players, but very, very confined. Like, they put themselves in a straitjacket based on what they're confronted with visually in the game. So one of the things I struggle with the most is, and this is probably because of the overlap or whatever, the blurred lines for me between role playing, tabletop role playing, where we use Roll20, so there's some degree of visual, but a lot of it is based on what's verbally given, or the context, or even music. And funnily enough, I've started writing my own little pieces of music to use in my D&D campaign, which is a lot of fun. Something for another podcast, maybe. But I can then convey and set the tone and the ambiance and the emotion, play on the emotional heartstrings or whatever. A lot more simply. I mean, it's more effort and time to create that content, obviously, but it's rewarding and it comes across a lot easier because people are already in that kind of theater of the mind space. In video games, my one of the things that I struggle with is having myself gotten past quite quickly the point of, it's just whatever assets I'm looking at. So I started in that straitjacket as well. And then I suddenly thought to myself, no, this is nonsense. The game only gives me, I don't know, a pork pie and a fish and chips, but I want, pizza.
Yeah.
Or a strawberry daiquiri. So I'll just hand somebody the glass of beer and I'll go, oh, here's a strawberry daiquiri I just knocked up for you. I found some strawberries out the back. And you can hear the cogs whirring because the players are like, there are no strawberries in this game. It's like, yeah, there are, but because I said there are, So I go into that space, and I think that having that is the few years of tabletop role playing has really helped me in that regard. And I'm trying to gently encourage and nudge people and nurture that a little bit in the communities that I touch base with. And you can usually see the difference right away from the ones that, and it's subtle sometimes, the ones that can do the very creative thing, but still with the straitjacket somewhat on, maybe loosened a little bit, but it's like I'll take the building objects and I'll make them look like something else.
Yeah.
And that's fun. And the people that will put a rock in front of you and say, this is my rock golem. It's called Barney, and so on and so forth, right? He eats sausages, but only on a Tuesday. It's Tuesday today. Do you have sausages on you? If not, he might attack you. And make a story.
Shit, Barney, like here that. You go.
Yeah, sure, quick. So, yeah, we're trying to, I'm trying to encourage that, and sometimes it's the video game space can be frustrating in that regard, because it's hard to get people to get out of the straitjacket. Even good RPers fall into it, and I'm sure I do from time to time. So I'm sure people can find a clip or call me out on it next time I don't do what I'm preaching. But yeah, I think it's just such a healthy space to get into, and I'm glad that there's more and more role-playing video games. There's a whole, huge sort of world out there, multiverse, maybe the right phrase, all the GTA stuff. And there's the ones that I don't really want to do, because things like people are like, oh, do GTA. I'm like, no, because I want to get out of like technology in the modern world. I can't escape. I'm sure I could, but I don't feel like I want to escape in a world that mimics our own. I'm much happier riding a dragon than I would be SMSing the president or something about the fact that they forgot to take their sandwiches to work that day or something. But yeah, that's kind of like, there wasn't really a hard thread to follow, because I wanted to improvise, I guess, somewhat deliberately. I suppose the one I did have a couple of questions. I don't know how we're doing for time, but I was thinking we could talk about but I think you already did this, which is great and kind of what I expected, talking about like what was an example of something that just either caught you off guard or that you thought was very fun. And I like what you talked about with the magic item. Here's a little anecdote. I did something 2 weeks ago in our campaign, which was several weeks back. They got a few items. They helped some goblins out. The goblins were being attacked by undead, and they helped them out. The world that we're running, they're mostly monstrous party members, and it's not the stereotypical kind of like goblins are bad and that kind of thing. It's a lot deeper. Anyway, they helped this lot out, and as a gift, they were offered to delve into some piles of junk and loot that they'd taken from some old abandoned ruins not far away, and yada yada yada. Anyway, they got a couple of items that they used a bit of detect magic or whatever that looked magical, and one of them was a bugle. And one of them, the party members, it was actually wasn't given to them as a magic item or anything. It was just like, oh, there's this kind of fine looking musical implement. You could probably buff that up or whatever. And so anyway, one of the guys, one of the sort of leaders of the group, is a kind of military, went through military training and everything, but he's now like hiding, and anyway, the whole story about that. And he's a hobgoblin, and he took this bugle. So a few weeks go by, and I'm thinking, whatever, people forget about, and I tend to forget about these things. I have to be careful with my notes, because I throw these items, and I'm like, they're like, what was that dagger? I was like, by the way, shout out to Bandy the Zombie. I still don't know what that dagger was. But yeah, they were in this battle, and they defeated this great undead juvenile kraken thing that I sort of made up. And they were celebrating, and so this guy takes out the horn, and he's like, "Wow, this is a great victory! So I'm going to blow on this bugle. It looks like a war influence." So like that, and then I'm like to the rest of the party, I'm like, "This character just disappeared, vanished from your eyes." And because they know me as a DM, they're like from multi-year, they're like, oh shit, he's gone to another dimension, or he's been teleported across the realm, or they're like, and everyone, like, and the player, they're like, oh shit, we're in a really dangerous place, and one of our party just disappeared, like our leader, no less, And I said to the others, but you can hear a bugle being played right around where he was. And then it slowly dawns on them. So I said, congratulations to the character, to the player. I said, your character now has the Bugle of Invisibility. So basically, as long as you're playing a loud tune on this bugle, you're invisible.
I love it. It's absolutely stupidly lovable. I love it. It's so good.
But it was so fitting. The character, a bard, military trained. I give him a bugle. It turns him invisible. If he uses it, he has it for several weeks in his pocket. Then takes it to celebrate the battle. Disappears in front of all of his crew in a boss lair kind of environment. So yeah, and then obviously he stopped playing and reappeared.
Oh, I know. I now have this mental image of a rogue kind of going, sneaking along as stealthily, as slowly as you can. And then you have these two guards kind of going, did you hear that? And then this rogue in the background going,
yeah.
And they look at him and like, no, we're losing it. No.
Nothing to see here.
It's kind of like I'm not getting paid enough to investigate this sort of situation. But then there's this rogue going,
we were specifically paid to stop anybody we could see trying to enter the...
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just, all of those moments, like they are created moments of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've talked about this before on the stream, but one of my more favorite moments regarding role-playing was when two party members, like they were going to go into this huge base and do recon, find out what they're up against.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because a week down the road, there's this invading force. This huge army is on its way to lay siege to this huge walled-in stone area. Yeah, and they're going to send in 5 guys to figure out what's inside, get a tally, and everything. Middle of the night. All right, fighter, huge guy.
Mm-hmm. Grappling
hook. Swing, natural 20. And I'm like, roll again. And he rolls again. Natural 20. And I'm like, roll again. 5 natural 20s in a row.
Wow.
Yes. And then on the 6th one, he confirms, of course. Like, this is a confirmed crit ages ago. But I was like, you know what? Let's roll with this. So I'm like, right, you've just rolled 5 20s in a row. Rolling anything 5 times in a row is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone rolling a crit and then confirming is amazing. But I was like, okay, how do I play off this? He has just basically beaten RNGesus to the ground with his grappling hook. All right. And then I'm like, okay, you get a good hitch with your grappling hook. And as you tug, you feel it come loose. I'm like, after 5 natural 20s, I'm like, hold on. Suddenly, the entire wall starts crumbling inwards on the base camp that you're supposed to be going inwards of. So these giant stone citadel walls are now crumpling down on top of all of the barracks and soldiers that are within there that they were supposed to go and do something about. So this party of 5 people had now leveled an entire military garrison before the invading army comes, and then the next thing they did was like, should we set up camp or?
yeah. We'll take a short rest.
Yeah, we'll take a short rest, and then they started going looting and everything. It's like,
we loot the military camp.
Yes, basically that is what they did. They found, oh my god, I think they retired after that. I can't quite remember, but just that moment, it'll stick with me.
Yeah.
And the fighter was like, I'm keeping this forever. This is my new main weapon.
Yeah. I mean, there you go, kids. So it pays, stay in school, and if you play D&D or any other role-playing game that involves dice, make sure they're Russian dice.
That moment, it's just amazing. But those kind of moments is also something I want to bring with me on computer. And there's one game that's been close to being able to allow me to do this. Neverwinter Nights.
Okay.
Neverwinter Nights as a role-playing game on the PC was very open. Like, yeah, it stayed within the D20 boundaries and everything, but it was so open. It was so, like, you could go in and you could create items.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had a short bow called Patwing.
As you do.
Yeah, because every time it fired, it manifested a new arrow in your quiver. And then you'd get one bonus arrow for every kill, so that you could then pull multi-shots or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy that I gave it to, he got haste and a lot of few other things. And patwing. One thing I forgot was that it also generated 1 arrow per X amount of hours of rest. So suddenly, in the morning, he got up after a long rest. He was going to move. Like, you are encumbered. I was like, what the hell is going on? I look at my inventory, and it's chock full of arrows for this short bow. Like, might want to tweak that. But that's one of those quirky magical items again. Through my own fault, but that's the sort of thing I want to do. And I kind of want to set up a session where I want to try that with players and do this kind of DM role and spawn in monsters and send them on adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Because that comes very close to the real thing, like to rolling the dice and sitting around and talking about things. And
I think it'll happen one day. I think there'll be some sort of mixture of VR or AR.
Oh,
I can imagine that would be, and I'm surprised. I mean, maybe there even is things out there. I'm not usually the most clued in, but that would be an interesting direction or crossover or whatever to do, like from a Wizards of the Coast type thing, with like people with those kind of capabilities and make an effectively open-ended world. I mean, maybe one of the reasons it doesn't exist because the movie business might go out of business or whatever. But I think there's definitely something in that'll become real where you can do all those things. And I think the one element that's missing is that kind of DM role or whatever. I don't think anybody's really got their head around. I know there was a game, I can't remember the name, but that tried it. With a dedicated DM sort of role. I don't know if it was a Wiz Coast one or a Pathfinder one or whatever.
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons had a release where they did that at some point. Yeah.
I tried it, and I think it was just there were too many limits to it or bugs or whatever. But I know that what we've been doing in Valheim, Lanaver's been sort of mini DMing and setting up a few little quests and trials, and we exchanged a few ideas. So we're trying, and that's a good thing, having a dedicated server to actually create some quests that we can take our willing role players, and that's been a really fun experience as well. I think it's a really good segue at this point though, with the laughs, to come to something to smile about.
Yes. And for my sake, there's actually two things I want to bring up. First, just a quick mention to a TikTok creator, former MMA fighter, called Tank Tolman.
Okay.
His nickname is Tank, of course. He and a lot of others, not just him, but he has gotten so many people excited about workouts and working out at home through creating something called nerd workouts. And what they've basically done, like, he's created a whole series around how to work out as a dwarf from Warhammer.
Oh, cool.
So you have this giant Warhammer that you use and everything, and so many people have been inspired, me along the lines of that, to start using these tools as a workout instead of again, rolling back to role playing, the constraints of your own mind that, no, this isn't a dumbbell. I can't use this to lift weights. Of course you can. It's heavy as old balls. Lift it. Lift it with the vigor of somebody who's going into battle. Do the motions. There is something happening to your body. That is basically what he said. And And it's so amazing to see all these people that are so happy about that and feel like, yep, this is something I can do. This is something I can get behind because it's relatable. It's something that your heroes have done, and suddenly you're there. You're part of them. And on the other spectrum of this whole something to smile about, somebody I rated not too long ago called Megsmashables, also a TikTok creator. She draws, and she's really good at it. She draws these fantastic things. Like, we're talking everything from she generally takes 2 to 3 animals and mashes them together and creates these wonderful mashables. Like, you have everything from the platypus bumblebee to the I think it's a quartz spider, and like, she has all of these wonderful ideas, and she's having a lot of fun with them, and she shares them with her community and on TikTok, and I can just get lost in these drawings because it loops back to that freedom of mind and that freedom of creativity, and I absolutely love that. So shout out to Megsmashables from my sake.
Yeah, likewise. Oh, I went along with that raid, and it was a bit late of a day. I think it'd been a stream day. I can't remember which day it was, but anyway, they'll blur into one eventually. But I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I liked also that it was a very positive vibe there.
Yeah.
Very wholesome feel, and the artwork was truly beautiful. And I agree with you fully that just creating something new by these so-called mashables, I was a bit unsure at first. I thought either this is going to be a very peculiar cooking stream, but no, yeah, it was one of those channels where, and I love these things, and this is kind of why I wanted to have this segment at the end of the podcast. Was there's so much good stuff out there, and there's so much news and everything else that would have you believe there's nothing good going on, and everything's coming to an end. And sometimes you just have to stop and breathe and look, and it's like Bob Ross reruns that are on Twitch from time to time, stuff like that. There's a whole load of goodly places and people and way more than the opposite. So why don't we give them a shout out, and why don't we give them a big up? And I really, Megsmashables was one of those channels where within, let's say, 60 seconds or whatever, right? Probably not even that long, but let's call it the 60 seconds litmus test or something, right? Within 60 seconds, you've kind of made your mind up, like, I'm going to hang on or not. Or maybe they get another 60 seconds because I'm curious or confused. But generally, especially if I'm tired and it was late that evening, I make my mind up. And she definitely won that sort of dwarven heart in 60 seconds. It was like, this is good stuff. This is the kind of thing that I want to see going on, and I want more people to enjoy. And I'm super excited that our sort of extended Good Vibes community arrives there. Because that you're doing something good for people, and you're bringing, that kind of wholesome, positive vibe, and just sharing some smiles and the creativity as well. I love that. And then you get the welcome and all that, and that's always my 60-second thing, as well as like, I don't go in. I always say to people, never blindly follow anybody in that. There is always the one or the other exception I'll make, but people, I say, go there, hang out, and if you find yourself having fun and a smile on your face, then remember to tickle that follow button. And that was one of those ones where after the 60-second litmus test, I was able to tickle the follow button and then get the most hearty and genuine warm welcome to the channel that I really appreciate. And you can tell that straight away. You look them in the eye and it's like, okay, they mean it. And it's not kind of, there's another name or that. It was straight there. So yeah, go Dwarven approved. Go there, mash the follow button. See what? Yeah, you will not be disappointed. I really enjoyed that. I've got one. Which is a Twitter thing.
Okay.
Twitter, place where loads of positivity and good stuff. But no, this I think that he has a. Let me check what it says. It says, "Welcome to the positive side of Twitter." That's how he starts his profile. I love it.
Big words, right off the bat.
Up to but it's an account called, I'm gonna butcher this. I'm usually perfect in my pronunciation of everything.
Yeah.
But his name is Mr. Alsace. No, it's Buitengebieden. It's Dutch anyway. So Buitengebieden is an awesome channel. I've retweeted a few things recently. I've been watching them, and it's basically one of those places of like at least one, if not a dozen. Every day there'll be something in there that will make you smile or make your heart melt or shed a happy tear or whatever, and it's just chock full of stuff that is, yeah.
Can I just say right off the bat, I'm jumping into this Twitter now. I'm just gonna describe what I'm seeing. The first thing I'm seeing is a tweet that was made yesterday, Pi Day, where somebody's showing a video of the drumming guy, which has the head bopping cat meme next to it, which has become really popular on Twitch. Somebody's showing that video to another cat, and then suddenly the cat starts going, yeah, he's bopping along to this. He can get on board with this. That's the first thing I see, and I'm instantly I'm smiling.
Yep. Like a short comment, and he says the internet is undefeated. But the really funny thing is he had that. And then if you scroll at some point, you should find it. He said like, let's keep this going. I'm looking forward to seeing somebody with their cat watching that video of that cat bopping to the original cat bopping. Yeah. And there is in the timeline of another cat with the picture and it's just stacking, and it's hilarious.
Oh, I love when people do that.
Yeah, it's down there 22 hours ago. There's another one. So there's a white cat bopping to the tabby cat that's bopping to the original video. I'm always looking at the video trying to work out, like, is somebody moving their head or scratching their tail, or what's the deal there? But it's just, goodness knows. But yeah, the one that really got me, I ran into only a few days ago, but it was the one I ended up using after the grumbling for Friday, and it's the old, I've forgotten the name of the band now, but anyway, that na, 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 you know, and somebody did a meme 2 years ago, and I missed it because I don't notice things regularly, but they did a sort of an overdub of like, it's Friday, then it's Saturday, Sunday, what? And they just go all crazy or whatever. And the video was somebody jumps out of a car. They're like, hey, you know where we're at? And they're like, I don't know, where are we? And like, it's Friday, and then it's Saturday, Sunday. Jumps out of the car, like, so they play with the whole space and time thing. And he jumps out, and then he just does really awesome dance moves. And the one I got on Friday, which I retweeted as part of my thanks for the grumbling, was a young girl who's a double amputee. She's got the, what is it, the South African guy, whatever, the blades. She's got the blades attached at different heights even on her legs, because she's got one at the knee and one at the halfway down the other leg. And they do that whole meme of like, they play the music and like, you know where we're at, it's Friday, and she gets out of the car and does the dancing, and she just looks so excited, and obviously they're creating content and whatever, and it just made me so happy and so warm in my heart to see such a positive, like, if I try to imagine being a double amputee, like, you know, and as a child, there's always this, you know, better younger because you don't have the whole lifetime of memories but anyway, just this girl being, you know, like brave or whatever the right words are, but strong enough to just get down and party and be part of this meme. She must understand like the context, and she's obviously, they've probably as a family watched the videos or with their friends or whatever, and then they make their own, and the car rolls along like at a really slow tempo, and she just dances on these blades for both of her amputated legs. And it's like, you know, just the bottle of emotion and positivity, and that was something that made me smile.
A force
And
for
then
good in
since
the
then,
world.
I've been following this feed, and it's just full of the most nonsense, the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah, I've hit follow on that account now, to put it like that. But I think we're gonna round it off there. Big smiles with all the positivity, but I want to focus. I want to say that we're not gonna channel toxic positivity. We are realistic about things in the world, but we want to bring up things that are positive. We bring up things that are smiles, because it is so important in this day and age to do that. So, with that being said, it's been goodbye from Grumbles.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. And thank you for exiting to port together with us.
I'm glad you said that.